This episode of the Occasional Podcast is brought to you by the LSA Group, the new high-end, high-value speaker standard, and also Core Power, state-of-the-art power at real-world prices. Today's episode is also brought to you by Qobuz, lossless and high-res streaming and downloads. 50 million tracks in all genres in the best possible quality. Qobuz supports the audio industry and appreciates the needs of discerning audiophiles. Try it for free now at Qobuz.com. That's Qobuz.com. You have tuned in to the Occasional Podcast Season 4, Episode 7. We are truly rounding the bend on Season 4. And today is a bit of a doubleheader due to the timeliness of both of these interviews. First up, we have an interview with the two directors of a documentary called Vinyl Nation. That film is currently out, and you can buy tickets to stream it online and help support record shops and small film venues at their website called vinylnationfilm.com. That'll show you where to go to kind of check out the film and all the locations you can buy a ticket for that show. We also have an interview with the president of Marantz, and they have two new products that are out that are a major shift in the way they kind of present the brand, and that's very exciting. So I wanted you guys to get that while the product was still hot in the market. Vinyl Nation is a documentary about record collection and the resurgence of vinyl across the world in recent years. It's co-directed by Christopher Boone and Kevin Smokler, and is really put together in terms of showing you what different record collectors look like and kind of how the entire hobby has evolved in such a short time. Along with co-host Brian Beasley, we interview the pair to see what it was like filming people and their record collections, what, if any, surprises they found along the way, and what their thoughts on audiophiles are in general. Hey everybody, thanks so much for joining us today. We are joined by two guys from the documentary called Vinyl Nation, and that is a doc about record store, the resurgence, record stores, the whole vinyl kind of situation we find ourselves in. Thank you so much for joining. Christopher Boone, Kevin Smokler, how are you guys doing today?
Great to be here. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you. We're doing well.
We are joined, of course, with my fabulous co-host, Brian Beasley, and we both got a chance to watch the movie, and I gotta say, it was very, very interesting to me, from my perspective, to kind of see what two other people take on this whole record resurgence that we see, because I don't know if it was timely enough. The documentary was recorded a little bit earlier, but more recently in the news, they said that for the first time ever, CD sales have been eclipsed by vinyl sales. I mean, not the first time ever, sorry, but the first time in like recent history since CDs kind of came up. So that's like a big deal. I think it's significant in that this is not just a fly-by-night kind of puff of smoke. We're seeing a pretty major trend that I think we all kind of hope lasts for, as long as it can. Where did this idea come from, and how did you find your interview subjects that you selected for this documentary?
Yeah, this is Kevin. It's cool that you brought that statistic up because you can imagine we got sent that article a few times and
just once or twice.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
Yeah, just once or twice. By about the seventh time, we were like, "Thank you for looking out for us," and we're also like, "I'm a complete person. I have something other than records going on. I promise you." But no, it's really cool because it almost brings to fruition a story that really began in 2007, because that was the recorded nadir of records. Mm-hmm. And from that point, they begin their comeback, which has not stopped since. And here we are 13 years later. And the record resurgence shows no sign of slowing down. And in fact, there was an article that was published just a few weeks before that statistic you talked about was cited that said record sales, despite most of America's record stores being closed or severely curtailed for business, are up this summer from last year. That was published in Quartz, I believe, at the beginning of August. So that is, while we still fear for our for the future of the nation's record stores, we take that as really good news, and as something, and as the special thing we were trying to get at in our movie. When Chris and I came to this story, it was a decade in to the resurgence. We started talking about it in the spring of 2018. So the question of why our records is coming back had been debated to death at that point, and certainly didn't need a 92-minute documentary to add to that conversation. So we talked about that a little bit in our movie. We kind of knew when we were editing, we're like, okay, we got to get through that quickly, and we got to get to the bulk of the story, which to us was, what does it mean? And so the people we were looking for were not just people who were representative of that comeback. It would have been great to talk to the Jack Whites and the Questloves of the world. But what we really wanted, who we really thought embodied the story we wanted to tell, were ordinary people. And we found them mostly by having a sort of prescribed set of categories at the beginning, and some of them were obvious: record store owners, musicians, label people, manufacturers. And some of them were people who reflected what we saw as the generational shift. So we wanted parents and kids. We wanted really young people. And then we wanted basically anybody who didn't look like they were in the movie High Fidelity, like, which meant nobody who looked like us either. So, because we were like, if High Fidelity came out in 2001, that is a pre-record comeback story. So we kind of felt like we were in the post-High Fidelity age. And when we were looking for interview subjects, we would twist the knob in that way. We kept saying to ourselves, okay, you got a record store person, make them a woman, make them not white, make them 80 years old, make them 10 years old. Like we kept changing the filters on it that way, because we thought that would be truly reflective of the title we gave to the movie, which was Vinyl Nation, emphasis on the nation.
Yeah, I find that really interesting, because one of the things that I've always kind of said, just tongue in cheek, is that the best audiophiles out there are always the ones that come from the heritage, like a shared experience with their parents. Mostly, the guys who and their fathers have this joint experience, but they come into the hobby with such a good attitude. They're not like super angry about a lot of things, and it's about a shared sense of happiness that they come to it with. And I find that really interesting that you guys specifically look for those as well, because it is definitely a thing that can contribute and get you in earlier and get you with a very positive mentality around the whole thing.
I think nowadays, actually, it's not so much sons, but daughters that are coming into vinyl records. I mean, I have a teenage daughter. She's 17 now. My wife and I got back into records around 2014. And within a year after that, I believe my daughter had her own turntable. And we saw that in our research. Well, we definitely saw it when we went out into the field and we were shooting Record Store Day at Mills Record Company in Kansas City. When we went to Austin Record Convention, a lot of parents with their daughters, both dads with their daughters and moms with their daughters. So it's not surprising that Crossley sells a lot of turntables to young female fans through Urban Outfitters and Target. And they've been seeing it in their social media feeds when Tumblr was a thing, and now through Instagram. I mean, and that's really a big reason my daughter wanted it in the first place. I mean, she really did see the Crossley shrines on Instagram with the Christmas lights hanging, over the bed and stuff like that. And sure enough, she wanted to make her room look like that. But then after that, what's fascinating is they actually want to listen to records. They want to start collecting records, and that is the format that they gravitate toward. They use Spotify all the time, but when there's an artist that they really love, that's a record they want to go get. And then from there, they start digging. My daughter's big into going to antique stores, and she loves it when there is a used record collection in there, and she starts digging, and she truly buys things kind of based on how they look, or she's like, I think I've heard of this band too. So it's not just guys out there. It's a lot of female fans that have come into Vinyl Nation over the past, 10 plus years.
So, kind of continuing that, I take it obviously both of you are huge vinyl lovers yourselves. What's the backstory for each one of you on how you got into collecting records?
When I was young, I remember my mom's turntable was down in the basement, and neither of my parents were into popular music. Like they were in high school in the 50s, but it's not like we had a bunch of Elvis records or anything in the house. Like they never listened to popular music, but she must have at some point in time, because she had this turntable and we put it downstairs in our basement. And I'm the youngest of 3 boys. And so I remember having 45s in the late 70s into like very early 80s. And I would listen to a 45 of Another Brick in the Wall. And then I would put on Summer Loving from Grease. Like that was totally cool. And then I had my Fisher Price turntable up in my room because I know we had Street Records, but I had a Air Supply on 45, and I know I had got to be starting something. Never owned Thriller though. Never owned an album on vinyl. Like my album collecting started in the cassette era. So wasn't really into records, at that point in time, just moved right into cassettes, then in the CDs. I actually worked in a record store right after I graduated from college when I was in Wilmington, Delaware, and it was all CDs. I mean, that's 1997. Like we didn't sell any vinyl. That was when Pearl Jam had Vitology come out, and Stone Temple Pilots did whatever Pearl Jam did. So Purple came out on vinyl. And, there are obviously indie labels that were still keeping vinyl alive, but I wasn't in tune with any of that. So it was just all CDs at that point in time. And like I said earlier, back around 2014 is when I got back into vinyl during this current resurgence. And it was because my wife made the mistake of buying a turntable. And I've gone through these phases in life in terms of buying music. And I definitely hadn't been buying anything because of, iTunes and Spotify. And here comes this turntable into our house. It's like, okay, like you've opened the floodgates. Here we go. She's like, where are we going to put all these? Because, she's found the joy of tidying up and I have not. So it's like, well, I mean, this is how we like to listen to it. So she only ribs me about it a little bit. But our collection, I should say, it's nothing compared to what you see, in the film. But I have found that I'm much more connected with music when I have it in its physical format, when I can put it on the turntable, put the needle down, listen to the album, usually do it when I'm cooking. And also, I've said this before to other people, like, since my daughter has a turntable, now I can give her music as a gift in a physical format. And I always wanted to do that, but with iTunes and Spotify, I mean, here's a playlist, enjoy. Like, no, that doesn't really do much. So it's been really cool. And she turns around and does it for me too. Like I said, she likes to go to antique stores. And just recently, my birthday came up and she went and found some records. Like, I don't even know if you like any of these bands. And one of them was Rolling Stones' Tattoo You. And I put it on and I knew the first track was Start Me Up. And it actually wasn't until I put the needle down, started listening to it. I was like, wait, Maggie, I just remembered when I was a kid, my brothers and I had this on 45. I totally forgot until like, how did I forget that? So it's like, thank you so much for bringing this back into my life on vinyl.
It is a physical thing, but it also can take up a lot of room, whether it be the stereo equipment or the actual album itself. I thought you guys did a great job of showing that it's kind of a thin line between hoarder and collector, right? Chris, can you talk a little bit about that with some of the subjects?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think probably the best example of that in our film is David Katz-Nelson, because he has a huge collection. And when you see the film, you'll see how he has had to deal with that. And any major record collector who has had to move just once, and we have multiple stories in the film about that. I mean, it's a huge pain. And in fact, some people in our film talked about getting rid of their records because they had to move, only to buy them all back eventually someday, which is totally insane. So yes, they're a pain. They're total pain to store and to schlep around and to take good care of. Yet they are such a huge part of people's lives. And as you'll see in our film, record collections really define people. So for all the pains that they holding on to records and storing records may cause, they're just too valuable to people and their personalities to let go of.
The thing that I found was interesting in your selection of the people was that it seemed like at least one of the guys was like a hardcore audiophile. He had a pair of Kef blades standing behind him. He made the cut. My question for you guys is, how many record collectors are audiophiles? And when you started like reaching out to people, how many audiophiles came up? And it seemed like only one made the mix. So I'm interested in kind of combination occurred and how there's just one guy in the end cut.
Yeah, we had several actually, and they all are in the movie for different reasons. Some of them talking about sound quality and audiophile subjects, and some of them not. Chris Livengood, who owns Ember Audio and Design in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, is actually the guy who sold me my current stereo system. That's how we got to know each other. And he lived in California at the time. And then he went back to his hometown and opened this shop. And when he agreed to be in the movie, he said, we can shoot it in the listening room we have in our place. And Chris and I were a little cautious about that because we really wanted to film everybody in physical space. And if a listening room was just 4 walls of soundproof padding, like it wasn't going to look very interesting on film. And then we got in there, and I remember it was a couple of times our cinematographer Sherry was like, just drew her breath in when we walked into a room and was like, oh, is this sexy? Like she did that. She did that when we filmed John Vanderslice at his recording studio. We went into that booth and she just looked at all the vintage audio equipment and the deep wood and just went, oh, is that sexy? Yeah. For that, we just walked in and she said, put the camera right here and let's go. Usually it took about an hour to set up a shot, But yeah, so Chris Livengood was someone we knew we had to have in our movie because when he sold me my stereo, he basically sat me down and said, here's how you need to think about sound quality, and delivered like a dissertation condensed into 3 minutes, where it's like, it's not about a particular amplifier. It's not about a particular cable. Don't let any brand name tell you have to have this in order to have good sound quality. Sound depends upon so many things, and it's getting the combination of gear and environment and how you like to listen to your music correct, because that will register as good sound quality to you. And since you're the person listening to it, that's ultimately what matters. You know, you can take the exact same set of gear and put it in a concert hall and then put it in a dorm room, and it sounds completely different. And so we knew that Chris Livengood would be the person who kind of anchored that conversation in our movie. But we talked to 45 people. We probably got 47 points of views on sound quality. So we really wanted to make it seem like an unresolved, continuing conversation at this point. So you'll probably notice in our movie that the section where we say, does vinyl sound better? We have these really rapid cuts where everybody's like, well, and the opinion keeps going this way and that way and this way and that way. And I don't, Chris, you'll have to remind me, I don't think we come up with an answer in that section of the movie. And I think that was kind of the point.
No, that was the idea. I mean, there's a variety of viewpoints, and we want to basically present all of them and then let other people kind of make their decisions as they watch the film. So, and again, I think Chris Livengood, like you said, is a great example of that because he's not going to force anyone down one particular road. I think he'd be the first to pull the rug out from under a lot of audiophiles and not just like preach a certain gospel. It's not for him. He wanted to always find like, what's the right system for who you are today in terms of listening to records. And that's what he wants to pair you up with, not the most ridiculously high price system there is out there. So, and I think we all enjoy records in our own way. So like I said, we want to have a variety of viewpoints more than anything else.
Not to pull from too small of a data set, but just to follow up on that, would you say percentage-wise from what you asked, how often is a record collector an audiophile?
I think I think everybody who gets into records will at some point, they might not be perfectly at the same time, but everybody who gets into records will at some point be like, I got into records not just because, you know, the thing is as big as your face and you pulled it up and it's like staring into the night sky and like the packaging is really cool and like I can display them, which shows anybody who comes over to my house what bands and artists I'm into. I think ultimately they are something about the sound of records is going to turn them on. We like to say to people, like, the moment, like when you set a needle down is like, it's like the drawing of human breath. There's like a really visceral connection to that. It's like the whole world stops when the needle comes down. And so like, I mean, even Chris's daughter, who I would not call an audiophile in the conventional sense, she lasted a year or two with a Crosley turntable. And then she was like, bump me up, man. Like, I mean, so even if she didn't have the language for it, it was clear to her that there was definitely a connection between records as a way of listening to music and the care of the device you play them on. That's the other thing about records. You can't separate the thing from the machinery. Like you can't separate the record from the gear it's played on. And that was something that we kept coming back to, because everybody's gear occupies a place in their home or their office and their workplace. And so we made sure to film everybody kind of near their gear and in their physical environment to underline that point.
I would just add to that, though. I think if you ask the people that are in our film that question, are you an audiophile? I think a very small percentage of them would say yes. Even though they do want to listen to music on records, because I think they would, in their mind, think, oh, an audiophile is somebody who has like the totally tricked out system. But I just have my turntable and my speakers. And again, if you're just listening to it on a Crossley, I don't think any of the young people will be like, oh, I'm an audiophile. They're like, no, I just like records. Like, do I? And also that's the point. Like, this is for everybody. Like, you don't have to be the quote unquote audiophile to be into records. That said, I would echo Kevin's point. At a certain point in time, you start to care a little bit more probably about how the record sounds and how you play it. And maybe you bump up from your initial Crossley suitcase turntable to a nicer turntable and better speakers and things like that, because you realize you could get a better experience out of it. But still, those people probably wouldn't call themselves audiophiles even after they've gone through that next generation.
Yeah, I think that if nothing else, it gets people thinking about the way things sound. Like if you just pull your music from an Amazon device and you call out the song and it plays back and you're just sitting there like whatever, it's very passive. But when you if nothing else, and you pick up the record and you take the time, it's laborious to put the needle down. You're thinking, I'm putting in effort to make this sound a certain way. It's no longer passive. And that kind of like hijacking, I think, or I would assume, would eventually people just be like, what is it? Does this have a sound? Is there a thing to sound? Like thinking about accuracy and sound, or just what you find more pleasurable from music is a starting point for a lot of people, I would imagine.
But I would also say that I think for a lot of the younger people who've got into it, and when we talk about this in the documentary, even the people who know exactly how records are made, records are magic. This is technology that's been around for decades and decades and decades. But there's something magical about putting a needle on a record and then the sound coming out. And a laser hitting a CD that you can't see inside of a deck, or your smartphone, magically delivering what you think is any song that's ever been made through Spotify. I mean, arguably that technology is bonkers. But putting a needle into a groove and hearing like that same song, it's like, how does this work? And you're watching it happen and you're going, how does this work? And like, if you forget to turn on your receiver, and you could still hear the music coming out of the record when you put the needle down. Like, that's crazy. And we don't have that for other things. It's all on our phones. It's all on our computers. We don't know how they work. There are no switches that we can see. And so I think a lot of us, myself included, but I think a lot of young people are like, this is fascinating. And just that experience alone is good enough. Like, that is cool enough. They don't need to ramp up necessarily to, oh my God, I got to make sure that like I've got all the noise reduction and what's the sound floor and got to get black vinyl, no colored vinyl. No, this record looks cool. It's Sunburst. It's awesome. It's my favorite band, and dropping the needle is still magic.
Yeah, you guys do a great job of talking about, there's also the nostalgia factor, but it is cool, right? You have the one record shop owner, he's like, we got to change the conversation to let them know we're still cool. Kevin, talk a little bit about, why is vinyl cool? Like, why do we all think it's so cool?
There's definitely a nostalgia thing going on. If you were old enough to have vinyl as your primary means of listening to music the first time around. And B, like we were talking about this in an interview yesterday, the comeback of vinyl coincides with the coming of Mad Men to television. And Mad Men was a basic cable show that, like, it wasn't like MASH. It wasn't like everybody in America watched Mad Men, but we can give it some credit for the increased interest in mid-century home furnishings, fashion, design, and stuff like that. And what is more mid-century home furnishing than a turntable? I think vinyl happens to be as cool as it is because even though the thing itself is a flat piece of black plastic licorice pizza, as it has been jokingly called before, the amount that has been done and can be done and will still be done with that is just amazing. And we have some of that in the movie where people are like, oh, well, we've got vinyl that's different colors on each side. We've got vinyl that spins backwards. We've got vinyl that goes from the inside out. I get all of that does have an effect on the sound. And if you want as pure an experience with the music as possible, there is something almost meditative and monastic about a totally black piece of plastic. And then it's just you. And then you lower the needle and then it's just you. And the music is like sitting out under a starry sky. And at the same time, there's something really cool about like, listen, I have 3 copies of the Pretty in Pink soundtrack. You give me an opportunity to buy that, the vinyl better be pink. Like it kind of makes sense. It's like you and the record are in on the same joke. Like I get it. Yes, I would like as pure an audiophile copy of Miles Davis's Kind of Blue. I would also like a version that is blue because I think that's real. I think that's really cool. There's something about a communication between you and the record sort of knowing what your expectations are and kind of foiling them. I have a couple of ELO records where it's different each time what they call side A and B. They call it this side, that side, the other side. And it's like, I think that's that level of wit and improvisation with the technology itself. You just don't see anywhere else.
Was the blood inside the blood record like real blood or fake blood?
No, real.
Yeah.
That sounds very unhygienic. I'm sorry.
That is a scene in our movie, and that's why the people at United Record Pressing in Nashville are like, you can do this fine, and we'll get the parts together for you. But like taking this blood record the last mile, this is Wayne Coyne of the Flaming Lips' idea, and it's in our movie. That's your problem. you got to make that work.
But
you want to put creativity in it. We'll put
well, I mean, he poured his blood into that album, literally.
Yeah.
Oh, it was his blood?
It is his blood. That's Wayne Coyne's blood. Yeah. You thought he got somebody else's blood? Yeah, no, that's his actual blood. Yeah, crazy.
Man, I want that album.
Love the Flame
joking. That's crazy.
Love the Flame Lips.
Yeah, there's something about how records, particularly used records, are like fingerprints or archaeological sites of everybody who came before. By the way, like audio gear is this way too. I have speakers from 30 years ago, but a brand new amplifier and a turntable from about 10 years ago, because I used to live in a place with a really rickety floor. So I had to get rid of that first turntable and buy a professional DJ's turntable with shocks in it. And so my stereo system is a reflection of all of these different points in my life. The same way records are signposts in one's own life, and also everybody who's on those records before. You know, we wanted our movie to emphasize that like records have physical evidence of the people who've owned them and the stories people have had with them. I mean, that is super cool to me to address Brian's earlier question.
So there were some really beautiful phrases that you guys captured in the documentary. Phrases like "I'm into inconvenience," "working for your art," going about it the long way. Do you think that the human race as a whole is searching for a more tactile experience? Is the virtualness of digital just draining us of something that is not part of the hunter-gatherer scheme?
I do believe that we are looking for something tangible. Kevin mentioned earlier the aesthetic that like Mad Men introduced of mid-century furniture as one impact. The other thing that we talked a lot about when we were putting this together and doing our research was I don't think it's a coincidence that the iPhone drops in 2007. So yes, I know we've had the iPod before that, but once the iPod merges into a smartphone and then we've launched the world of smartphones, now it is too convenient to bring your music everywhere. A number of years later, Spotify comes in and then just makes it like, okay, the idea, it's not true, but this idea that all the music that ever has been recorded is now at your fingertips whenever you want it, gets into all of our minds. And I don't think it's a coincidence that at that moment, as that technology takes off with the iPhone, people start to realize they are missing something tangible. They want something tangible. They need to bring something back into their lives. And CDs don't do it necessarily, and cassettes don't do it, although people are getting back into cassettes for sure. But vinyl, because it's big, it's beautiful. We've talked about the magic around it. It is something, and it goes oddly, as we talk about in the movie, hand in hand with streaming. Like you audition things on Spotify and you're like, I like this. I've listened to this a lot. I need to buy the album because I need to support the artist more than just the pennies they're getting from my streams. So I really do think people are looking for something to hold on to, because we're losing a lot that's going into the cloud, into the ether with our smartphones and our laptops. I mean, that's my take on it. Kevin, do you have anything additional on that?
There are whole swaths of people that we have nothing against, but we did not make a movie about them. And they are people who are perfectly content to have music be a kind of utility where you flip a switch and it comes on and you listen to it. And that is the relationship that you have with that. And no shame in that game. I think if music is something you are really enthusiastic about and really occupies a certain critical amount of space in your life, you're not going to be content with an algorithm kind of telling you what you should or should not listen to. The exploration and the searching is a big part of it. I think everybody we talked to for our movie, all 45 people who appear in it, are people who in some way defy the convention of who you think would be into that kind of music. You look at someone and you say, oh, I can tell exactly what kind of music that person would be into. And if you did that for the people who are in Vinyl Nation, you'd be wrong about 90% of the time. And I think that's very much connected to the very human process of having records in your lives and being handed things by complete strangers and them saying, I think you're going to like this. And strangely enough, those complete strangers being right, even though like they don't know a thing about you, or be willing to engage in the exploration for things that are not marketed specifically to someone like you. They're all just people who have this very Catholic small c love of music that exists outside of genre or demographics. And I think that, to me, that really says what is special and human about music, and how ultimately, like, we were not making a movie about records at all. We were making a movie about records as kind of a metaphor for human connection.
I can remember when I got into vinyl that, going to Amoeba was the best, right? And looking for music that I couldn't find online, you know what I'm saying? That for whatever reason hadn't transferred over. But you guys, and I have a total visceral memory of this, Urban Outfitters. That was a big deal when they brought the turntables in. Also, the frames. I don't remember, they put frames where you could frame your albums. And that's part of this too, is that it's not just listening to the music. There's a visual piece of artwork that comes with this music.
Yeah. When we started doing research for the film, before we started shooting, we kept hearing stories of like, oh, young people are buying records, but they don't have turntables yet. And I'm like, I don't really buy that until we started actually interviewing people, and they were telling us, oh, no. I bought records before I had a turntable. And we're like, okay, why? Tell us why. And a big part of it was the artwork, but a lot of it was also like, this is my favorite band. I went to go see them live. I want to support them. So I went to the merch table and there's their record. And I had to have it. It just calls out to them. And you're right. You can put it up on your wall. You can put it on display. It's like a patch, on your jean jacket back in the day. Like, this is who I am. And Ellie Fessler, who's in our film, and at the time we interviewed her, she was a student at Pratt Institute. This story's not in the film, but when we talked to her on the phone ahead of time, she said when she moved into her dorm freshman year, she brought her Crossley turntable and a handful of her records. She put them on her shelf. And immediately, I think it was a roommate, said, oh my God, like, you're into this band? Because she could see the record. She's like, I have tickets to a show. Like, do you want to go with me? And I'm like, yeah. So fast friends. And then shortly thereafter, a guy like walked by the room and saw her turntable, and he's like, I'll be right back. And he ran to his dorm room, came back down, holds up this album and goes, this is my favorite band, but I've never been able to listen to this record because I don't have a turntable. Can I put it on yours? And she's like, yeah, sure. And so this is not only is it like something that they put up, but this is a way for them to meet people. But yes, being able to put it on display, like the way my records here in our house is like, we don't have shelves where they're all slid in. We have these nice kind of display racks. And so it makes it easy to dig, but you can see kind of like the last records we've listened to are all sitting kind of in the front of those racks. And it also helps me remember, like, go to the back of the rack. You haven't listened to those records, like pull those out. And if you don't, you should go trade them in, you know? But that's what's so fun about it, is putting on display. Roz Lee is one of the characters in our film, and her Facebook I love so much because I live vicariously through her amazing collection. She is always posting photos of what she's listening to and throughout the day, and it's just phenomenal. But just like looking at the album cover art, it's just you just don't. I'm sorry, this little tiny thumbnail on Spotify, it doesn't do it.
It doesn't do it.
Thing.
Yeah.
You just want to hold it in your hands, and you want to open it up the gatefold. You want to look at the liner notes. You want to spend time with it. And I think that's just really special. And I think it is really what makes it attractive to all of us, new collectors, old collectors, everybody, essentially.
Yeah, I thought, you know, when you look at the film as a whole, there's definitely expectations that you guys had about what you were going to get out of this or what you thought might be said or happen. What was the biggest surprise for you out of filming all this? What was something you learned? What was unexpected from this experience?
The one we always like to talk about, and maybe Chris has a nuance on this, is that the process of making a documentary, we learned, is you always begin with one idea, and 60 to 70% of the way through, you find out you're actually making a movie about something else. And our post-production team had kind of warned us of that. He's like, you're going to shoot all the footage, and we're going to start putting it together, and you're going to see pretty soon that the movie you thought you're making is not the movie you were making. And we're like, pish posh nonsense. Of course we know what movie we're making. Like, we wouldn't have done all this if we didn't know what movie we were making. We thought we were making a movie about how the comeback of records had expanded and diversified the kinds of people who were into records, record equipment, all that kind of thing. It had grown the category, and we were living in the post-high fidelity era, which I don't know. I guess that would have been an interesting movie, maybe. And then when we were done, he was like, "No, I actually think you're making a movie about human connection. I think you're making a movie about how the analogness of records makes it easy for people who otherwise would be very different from one another and not have a lot in common to have something in common." And that's spiritual. That's enormously powerful. That's why we listen to music, you know, and I was like, wow, you know, frankly, that sounds better than what we thought it was. So that was probably like the central surprise to this movie. But Chris might have one that's more fun than that.
Yeah, no, I would just build on that a bit and just say it was always fascinating in the editing room to see these people that are really from totally different walks of life tell the exact same story, and being able to cut between those stories and just like making that visual connection. Like, this is why it has to be a movie. Like, you need to see these people who look totally different, and you have learned through the course of this film are very different, have these same experiences and are into records in very similar ways and love to dig through the crates in very similar ways. And again, you wouldn't know this about them necessarily. Like, maybe one person, yes, based on their profession, the other person, no way, unless they shared this part of their story. So that was really fascinating to me. The other thing I think surprisingly would be the people that you would think would be totally on board and are way into records had completely contrarian points of view. Like John Vanderslice is one of my favorite characters in the film. I mean, his opinions were just gold. And we had so much fun recording with him at Tiny Telephone. And he even told us ahead of time, he's like, listen, you're going to think I'm going to say one thing about records, and I am not. We're like, well, yes, we are on board to go. Yeah, it was just awesome to get just a variety of takes on things. And then also just ask questions like, does vinyl sound better? And just see what people would say, because that's the question that always seems to come up. And just have this panoply of responses that just like goes all over the place. And that was just really great. And just how do we wrap this all together kind of in a cohesive unit? Like, there is no right answer to this question. So those are the things that would stand out to me and that were fun through the course of shooting the film and discovering it in the editing room.
We've been asking the softball questions, but now it's time for the hardball question here. you guys cut to Buck from Boogie Nights and the wonderful scene of "This is hi-fi," and then you come back to Ben Blackwell, who says the line of the film to me. Audiophiles are the worst. Now, defend yourselves, gentlemen. Defend yourselves.
We don't have to defend ourselves. That is Ben Blackwell who has to defend himself. And as he said, when he said it, I know this will be used against me in the court of law. Yeah. I've just done my own.
Or podcast.
And I think what's so great about that is, I think with any interview, it's always great as you just get the cameras rolling. And to Kevin's credit, like not jumping on the very next question, because there's something more there. And I couldn't even tell you, I don't even remember. I'd have to roll back, look at the raw footage. I don't even remember what we were talking to Ben about right before that. And he had definitely finished answering something, and then he just rolled on. And again, he is literally in a studio at Third Man Records in Nashville, leaning on a lathe that they use, the blue room that you can see like reflecting on his face. And next door is like where they record, straight to acetate. Obviously, Ben Blackwell and Third Man Records and Jack Wright care a lot about how things sound. But he doesn't want to hear it if like you're going to come at him and be like, wait a minute, there was just a little bit. Like, I totally get it. Like, back to what we were saying earlier, does it sound better? It's just like, what is the experience for you? If something is ruining the experience for you, then it's ruining the experience for you. If you needed a pristine precedent of something, there's something just slightly off about it, and that's going to wreck it for you, then too bad. That's going to wreck it for you. That's basically, I think, where he's coming from. He's like, I get it. And he literally runs a business to avoid these mistakes. But it's just gonna happen because it's a physical process. And not every single copy is gonna be exactly like the other one. But that's what makes records so great. Like each record has its own story. And when records get passed down, and they do unfortunately get scratched or they have pops or whatever, that's a story. And that story gets passed on to somebody else. So the user records that I have that has those scratches, those pops, that's how I hear the song. Like when I hear the song digitally after that, I'm a little like confused. Cause I'm like, wait, there was supposed to be a pop there. Like it was supposed to rotate around 3 times. Pop, pop, pop. Like, where is it? Oh, right. That's my version. That's my version of the song. And I'm okay with that. That's just the story that the record is telling and the one that somebody else will get someday when I pass it on to them.
Was the young girl with the Disney record collection the actual daughter of the Crosley employee?
Yes.
Because she had an Audio-Technica, not a Crosley.
Oh, yeah. We I think we had 25 laughs about that in post-production. Like every time that shot came up, we're like, she has access to an entire company's worth of cheap or free gear, probably from her father's employer. And yes, that is an Audio-Technica turntable.
I think in their defense, Jason hasn't been working at Crosley like his whole life. And I do believe he owned that before he worked at Crosley.
Fair enough.
But also that turntable is really easy for her to use. She literally pushes a button and the lever comes out and comes back down again.
Yeah,
so
I think it's the one that Bees has, actually, Brian.
Yeah, it's the safest.
Yeah, it's right there.
It's like the safest way for her to play records and not wreck them. At that time, at that age, it was easy to teach. So, yes, we definitely got a kick out of that. So Basil, she's fantastic. We got to meet her too. She came out to lunch with us after we shot with Jason. So, and she is a lovely, lovely person. And I'm glad we can include that YouTube video that Jason had made in our film.
You touched on this before, Kevin. There is a whole this other generation, this younger generation. One of the interviewees is a gentleman by the name of Elliot. How old is Elliot? And how did you guys find him?
Elliot was 11 when we interviewed him. I think he's almost 13 now. And Elliot is the son of someone I grew up with. We had an empty afternoon in San Francisco. One of our interviews had canceled. And we were kind of looking at who we had booked already. And we're like, listen, we don't have any young people. And everyone we had in San Francisco in the Bay Area was an adult. And so we were kind of looking for a young person. And we put the call out on social media. And this old friend of mine got back to me and said, my 11-year-old son is really into records and he goes digging with his dad. And it's funny. We talked to Elliot on the phone beforehand just to see if he'd respond to questions about records. And I asked his mom, can we talk to Elliot on the phone? She says, well, Elliot's 11. He doesn't have much of a sense of what this this old telephone technology is. And so Elliot and I got on FaceTime, and he just walked me around the turntable and pulled out records and told me the story with each one. And I was like, Chris wasn't on that call, but I was like, Chris, Elliot's going to be great. And Elliot uniformly is one of the most beloved people in Vinyl Nation.
Man, he is so good on camera.
Yeah, we shot him like in reverse of how we did everybody else. Like everyone else, we would sit down for their interview, and then after the interview, we'd get up and check out their record collection and do B-roll with them and kind of keep it a little bit more casual. And we just decided before we even walked in there, like, we want to put him at ease. We don't know exactly how this is going to go. So like, we just got in there and just had Sherry just start shooting him, and just like go. And then Kevin just kind of would ask him some things and stuff like that, real casual like. And we told him like, listen, we'll do your interview after this. So we just want to, check things out and stuff. So that just really helped Elliot kind of ease into the whole process. And then we did a more formal thing. But as you can see from the film, I mean, that was the stuff that's Elliot,
Yeah. The passion, it's unfiltered, right? The innocence of how much he just loves the music. High Fidelity, the movie, you guys show a scene, the elitists. You guys think you're elitist. I came into vinyl a little later, and every time I'd go to Amoeba, there was all kinds of people there. But you guys really wanted to put a spotlight on that women, people of color. Like this is something that anyone can do. You don't have to walk into a record store and be intimidated. Why was that a theme that you guys wanted to kind of put in the film?
It was clear to us. I think because Chris had come to records in 2014 and I a little earlier than that, but it was clear to us that like a decade had passed. I mean, a decade had passed at that point when we started talking, since records had come back. And that hadn't been either of our experiences going to record stores. I mean, yeah, you go to Amoeba on a Sunday when, in pre-pandemic times, there were 75 people in the store and everybody's busy. They're going to be courteous, but they're also going to be brisk because they've got a lot of work to do. But our experience had largely been that people at record stores are really nice and they're enthusiastic about music. And if they sense that you're new or a rookie, which I often am when I walk into a record store, they're largely going to want to like get you on the same train as them. So it was our instinct that the record store as a high priesthood of music snobbery was probably not accurate. It was either only in certain parts of the country, or it was indicative of a previous era when records were scarce and was something that only a certain small group of people were into. The democratization of record collecting and buying and listening via vinyl had changed all of that. And, for the better. Like I think Chris and I are both the kinds of people who are like, yeah, listen, documentary filmmaking is not a giant universe either. It is not something that tons of people are into, but like our feeling is generally like more people at the table is better. We made the movie that way with who was on our crew too. And, welcome is better than not welcome. That was kind of our guiding philosophy from the beginning. And it's the way we live personally too,
And also we made a movie that we hope people who aren't into records would enjoy as well. And it's been gratifying when people have gotten in touch with us who maybe they are friends of ours or friends of friends. So that's how they maybe got introduced to the film. And they watched it and they're like, I don't own any records, but now I want to go buy a turntable. And I was like, okay. Not like we're trying to create converts, but I really feel like not only is record collecting for everyone, but we hope our movie can touch people as well in different ways. We want it to be a welcoming experience, whether or not you're into records. And I think the people that we were able to include in the film do a nice job of making it feel inclusive and making it feel like it's something that you could get into. So those are always fun stories for us to hear after people watch the movie.
My first record was Mickey Mouse Disco. What was your all's first record?
Oh, as a grown-up or as an adult? As a grown-up or as a child?
That was his first as an adult, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, I figured, yeah.
I thought that was obvious, Kevin.
You're right, yeah. Thank you for clarifying. I appreciate that, yeah.
No, Kevin, what was your first ever album that you remember?
My first ever that I remember as a child, because I had owned like 3 records before I had fully made the switch to cassette, was Freeze Frame by the Jay Giles Band. I was a little young and I didn't grow up in Boston. I didn't realize that like the Jay Giles Band had a whole life before they'd ended up on MTV. I didn't realize that until I was an adult. And now I'm an enormous fan of their sort of pre-MTV stuff and their MTV stuff, quite frankly. But like the record that got me back into records was Perfect Angel by Minnie Riperton, because that was the record that was playing at that dinner party that I went to. And so I made sure it was the first one I bought.
Nice. How about you, Chris?
Like I said, I never owned a full album as a kid. I think of the 45s, the one that I bought, I had an Air Supply 45. I was convinced that the singer was a woman.
Yeah, me too.
I think maybe it's like You're Everything in the World to Me or something like that.
Did it have that great white kind of pastel cover?
Yeah, well, it's just on the 45. So, but that I know that was a purchase that I had made. It wasn't my brothers that had done that. And then, like I said, I moved into cassettes, and by the time I moved into cassettes, like my first cassette was Huey Lewis and the News Sports. I do know that. But in terms of records, then coming back around as adults, when my wife bought the turntable, she was kind enough to get me at the same time. She bought a used copy of U2's The Joshua Tree because she knows that's one of my favorite albums. It's probably my favorite single side of an album, of any album, side A, start to finish, not a bad track. So so that's a special one in my collection.
Yeah, I also have Mickey Mouse Disco too. I purchased it as a grown-up because it's got some good. Macho Duck is great. It's a great Duck, track, baby. And Mickey in the leisure suit on the front of that album, like that's good stuff.
I don't know where mine ended up, but whoever got it, it was in pretty horrific shape. Because, you talk a little bit about this, but that is a thing. Like, I can remember my dad, like, do not touch the system. Like, because all you wanted to do was mess those levels. Like, you just wanted to, what does it sound like if I do this? It's like, oh.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys were of this time, but my first turntable, and I'm not even sure if this was a hand-me-down, was a Fisher-Price turntable, bright orange, the tone arm was plastic coming out. Now, I've seen this variant in blue as well, but mine was like this bright orange thing, and boy, oh boy, did that thing sound,
amazing.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, awesome. I think I had some of those, like, those records that came along with kids' books, like that came along in like a Spider-Man book or something like that. I had a few of those that I played on the orange Fisher-Price turntable.
Yeah, I was saying I had a flexi disc of it was a happy birthday song, not the happy birthday song, but a happy birthday song that was supposedly sung to you by aliens, and it had your name in the song. It was awesome, and of course I played that when it wasn't my birthday, man, because my name was in that song. That was very cool. I have no idea where it came from.
And back on one other point that you talked about, I did see this random YouTube table, and you were talking about the magic of how sound comes out of the record. There is like this weird kind of thing you can do with a nail and a piece of paper that will physically pull out the sound, and then the paper amplifies it and you'll hear music. But at the same time, it will completely ruin the record. So
I'm sure.
Yeah. I'll just watch the YouTube video.
It'd be good. It'd be good.
Let them damage their own record.
Yeah, we had Cutmaster Kurt in our movie gave us a little dossier. He wasn't in the movie, this thing he said, but basically about all these weird tricks and hacks he'd seen with turntables, people installing the tone arm upside down and playing the record while spinning on a pencil and stuff like that, so you could play the underside of it first, like all sorts of cool stuff like that. And that didn't end up being in the movie, but we were able to do that montage of that DJ montage of like Pam the Funkstress and all those people, scratching with their chin or scratching with the their forehead, stuff like that.
Very cool.
So Vinyl Nation, guys, congratulations. Where can people see the film?
People can go to our website, vinylnationfilm.com, and you can click the button Where to Watch. And then we've got all of our partners, the record stores and art house cinemas and some live music venues that are selling tickets. So you go find the link for your state, drop down there. You'll find one that's close to you. Click watch now and you can buy a ticket. 50% of the proceeds go to our partners. And we really want to make sure we're supporting all the record stores and the art house cinemas out there, places that we want to still be here after this whole pandemic is over. So we strongly encourage people to get a ticket and support a local business in their area.
Yeah, moving on actually real quick, how are these record shops doing with the pandemic?
It depends. Those I think that have had a really great customer base and those that have good email lists and good social media presence seem to be doing pretty well. We've been talking with a number of them. Those are in our movie, and then other ones that we've met throughout the release of this film. Had a number of them had some pretty successful record store day drops, and the second one is coming up this weekend on Saturday, September 26th. So if this drops before that, we highly encourage people to shop the second one as well. But they've all had to find different ways to go about it. Curbside pickup, only letting a few people in the store at a time for a limited amount of time to dig. If they had a website presence, sell records that way. Like Kevin, what else have we seen from the record stores have been making their way through the pandemic?
A lot of different techniques of how much they'll be open. Will they opening at different hours, staggered hours? All the staff is masked up. A lot of pre-ordering, which has been very successful. Record stores typically pre-ordering was seen as a way like we don't want to do too much of that because then why do we have the physical location? But now if people know that they want the new album by Janelle Monáe or Neil Young or whoever, the record store will advertise it on their website so it can be pre-ordered through the record store, sent through the mail, and then the record store can get credit for the credit revenue from the sale. We've seen a lot of that, which I still miss going to record stores, but I also appreciate having that relationship with record stores, knowing when music by artists I like are coming out, because A, it makes it easier to know what to buy if I want to jump on it quickly, and B, it gets you in the habit of just checking in on your favorite record stores, even if it's only digitally on a regular basis.
Yeah, and just on a footnote on that, a lot of the audiophile brands, the speaker makers, and even the headphone guys, from what I pull, and I can't say this for everyone, but the ones that I've spoken to are flat, and even a lot of the headphone guys, their sales are up because you want to be at the home, you can't listen to your speakers, the whole family's there. They're selling a lot of headphones. People are like, let's get into this more. This is a time, I think, for a lot of people that are looking for other forms of entertainment at the home that really spark that.
Makes perfect sense,
earlier, yeah. Record sales, again, are up this year over last year. So to your point, people are looking for different ways of entertainment at home. And not surprised that headphone sales have gone up.
Nice. Yes, go support your local record shops and go see Vinyl Nation. Filmmakers Kevin Smokler and Christopher Boone, thank you so much for being with us, guys. Really
Thanks for having
appreciate
us, guys. This was great.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Today's episode is also brought to you by Audio Research Corporation. Since 1970, Audio Research has remained dedicated to the advancement of state-of-the-art in music reproduction and was the pioneer of the high-end audio revolution and owner of the high-definition trademark. Enjoy music the way it was truly meant to be heard with Audio Research. Visit audioresearch.com to learn more. Marantz as a company was originally founded in 1953. The brand has been around for a really long time, and over that time has had certain aesthetic changes that have evolved with the times. More recently, the company has just released two new products, the Model 3 integrated amplifier and the SACD 30N network audio streamer are a new statement from the company as to the direction which they're looking to move forward to in future years. In this interview, I'm joined by Marantz President Joel Sietsema and Senior Director of Technical Category Management, Emmanuel Millot. They take us down the path with Marantz, give us a history, and really key us into how things are done in terms of developing the Marantz sound, developing the Marantz brand, and a lot of really fun insights behind the curtain. Hey everybody, thanks so much for joining us. A very special guest today, Joel Sietsema, President Marantz and Classe. The corporate brand there is called Sound United. And Emmanuel Millot, he is the senior director of the technical category and management. Thank you guys so much for joining me here.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
So I'm really excited about this because we're gonna get a unique look at a very large company in the audio space, but from both a management, being Joel the president, and a technological kind of deep dive with Emmanuel, which is very exciting because usually we either get one or the other, but this time we're getting the full 360. So thank you both for jumping on a call simultaneously, and everybody, of course, feel free to jump in whenever if you have something to add, or if Joel has something to add while we're talking technical. This isn't broken out specifically, of course, for either one person. But I did kind of want to start with Joel. And when it comes to like the larger corporate high fidelity audio companies, things can get a little bit more complicated than the usual thing. So if you could just kind of give us a brief history of the company of Marantz and Classe, but also give us the breakdown for how Sound United fits into that whole umbrella.
Yeah, sure. So Sound United is owners and operators of a handful of kind of well-known performance audio brands. So Sound United owns and operates Denon, Classe, Marantz, Definitive Technology, Polk, Boston Acoustics. So, it is really more of the corporate brand. Each of the brands has an extensive legacy in most cases. So Denon's 110 years old. Founded in Japan. Marantz was founded in 1953 in New York. Each one of our brands has a story like this. Now, Sound United as a corporate brand really wasn't founded until 2012 or thereabout. And, to us now it's more of an industry and corporate brand more than anything. So each one of our brands, the consumer brands like Marantz and Classe, have our own dedicated team and leadership assigned to it. Each one of the brands has its own set strategy, its own set product plan, marketing plan, and so forth. So each one of our brands really within the Sound United portfolio needs to sort of operate on their own individually.
And so since we're kind of focused on Marantz this time around, can you just give us that brief lowdown on Marantz as a brand has been around, as many audiophiles know, for a very long time.
Yeah.
Can you kind of give us a quick history lesson on the Marantz brand?
Yeah. So Saul Marantz is the original founder of Marantz, no surprise. He founded the company in 1953. Now, he had been working on products from his kitchen table, as the story goes. And his original mission was to create the most musical sounding products that he could, the purest sound possible. And he really wasn't satisfied with the products that were available in the market at that time. So he set off on a mission to create the very best products he could. That was really the founding of the company, and sort of that core, that heartbeat of Marantz is creating the most musical sound. Marantz on its own has been through a handful of different ownership cycles, but one thing has remained is that commitment to musical reproduction. So Sound United acquired Marantz in 2017 after a handful of these different ownership cycles. Marantz today stands as a very global brand, almost 70 years old. We continue to have a DNA in high-performance musical reproduction, and that's what brings us to today. We're excited to talk about our core business and some of the innovation that we're doing here.
When you kind of think about the Marantz product line, there's some very high-end stuff, and there's some stuff that stretches down to a little more around the budget side. What do you kind of feel like is the Marantz customer? Do you guys position yourself as like the friendly mainstream brand? Is it something that you feel appeals to hardcore audiophiles? Where do you land in that kind of proposition?
Yeah, I mean, we really think about sort of two customer segments, all focused on performance. Okay, the first customer target that we really think about, who really is a big fan of Marantz, is the audiophile. So, our products, yes, they span from, let's say, $500 US to almost $10,000 US. So we do have a broad assortment. But because of our focus on hi-fi, AV receivers, and so forth, we really are targeting customers who care a lot about performance first. And those audiophiles really do gravitate towards the Marantz brand in a lot of ways. The other customer target that we're really trying to cater to now, and I think some of the things that you'll see in our future, is someone we call the discerning explorer. This is maybe a younger consumer, someone who cares a lot about performance is very particular about the brands that they surround themselves in their life. So they might buy the very particular watch brand or a very particular sunglass brand, or in some cases an audio brand. And we think that this person, maybe they're an old soul of some sort, right? They're looking for, times where they can sit down, enjoy a glass of whiskey with maybe their friends or family, and be able to enjoy music. And I think in that customer target, although they care about performance, they may not be technically an audiophile. And so we definitely think Marantz will appeal to that customer target as well. That's a new customer for us that we're looking to attract. And I wouldn't say it's... I really wouldn't say that it's in conflict with creating the very best products that audiophiles will care about, but it's a new sort of budding customer that we feel is a new customer that we can speak to and target.
Yeah, I think keeping the hobby fresh is something that we all aspire to do. Keep fresh people coming in, grow the hobby, grow the audience, grow those who appreciate music on a deeper level. So I applaud you guys for that for sure. We've done a lot of these interviews with a lot of different companies, and some of them are very big, like yours, and some of them are very small and maintained by just a couple, maybe an engineer or two, or marketing department and an engineer. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to the larger companies, I like to ask this question because it's a big brand. It's a big company with multiple people working on it. What do you kind of think is the biggest hurdle when it comes to conducting a company like Marantz? You're the conductor at the front of the stage. What is the biggest benefit to that? And what is the things you have to overcome in terms of navigating that huge river of a company?
Yeah, it's a great question, Brian. I think, one of the things that I think about that's a hurdle for a brand like Marantz is that although we have a very core mission to create the most musical sound possible, there are very different product needs for our customers in the various markets around the world. So a customer that we have, a fan of Marantz in Japan, might feel very differently about the types of products they would like to see from Marantz than a customer in Western Europe, for example, or for that matter, a customer in the United States. So how we show up to these customers in these different countries is challenging because the products in most cases, they're not one size fits all. And so I think that's a hard thing for any global brand to be able to achieve, is to create a set of products that will speak to the various needs in these different countries. So I think a global brand like Marantz, that's definitely a challenge that we have. I think the biggest benefit, which is maybe the trade-off of being global, is we have a lot of scale. And I think with scale comes the ability to integrate the latest technology, the very best engineering performance and acoustic performance. And Emmanuel is very privy to this and can speak a lot to it. But the fact that we have size and scale in our company, it allows us to create better products at a more affordable price to really give that better performance to customers at the best price we can possibly afford to do it at. And I think that's a lot of smaller brands don't have that ability. So I think that is the trade-off, that we're able to bring that because of our scale.
That's a very interesting comment that you say, because I do hear that quite often, and maybe either both of you can speak to this, but one of the things that a lot of audio companies come back in these interviews when they're saying things is that there's a different sound, or at least at the bare minimum, a different need in each culture around the world. And I know some product categories, they're all obviously affected by this, but even more so for audio, I feel like there's a particular subculture for a lot of geographic areas in the world that are not overlapping as much as other products or just things in general. You think that like listening to music would be so universal, but somehow I've heard things like, the Germans have their own signature that they like, or the Japanese have a specific thing that they like. Do you find that to be true at all, Emmanuel or Joel, that they have a different sound signature, or is it refined mostly just to the product category, like the marketing needs?
I would say more than anything, there's different way to listen to the music. I heard that comment many times, that there's different sound across the world. And that was probably very, very true about 20 years ago, mainly for loudspeaker, where you probably had, that European sound, and I can talk about it being European or whatever, probably being more warm, more neutral. And then there was that US sound, probably more boomy, more bassy, I would say. But today, the whole world is blending, and I think there is more, I would say, good sound and good way to reproduce the music, and bad way. Where I see there's a lot of difference across the world, it's the way the people access to the music or listen to the music, and the genre and the type of music they listen to. But I think we at a stage where the products are becoming more and more global, and everybody have access to everything, and there's more and more global brand, as Joel mentioned, and probably less, I would say, local or national brand like we had in the past. So I would say that that's the way the world have changed today. And with the era of digital music, the quality is really there everywhere now, which is also something which is really different from what it was at the beginning of digital music.
When we make a product to be sold around the world, the CMF, or the colors, material, finish of the product, the construction, the industrial design, many of these things do have regional variations, or let's say regional preferences that we have to consider. So the finishes of an amplifier the preferences actually might be different from one country to the next. So we have to be able to find a happy medium where we can make our customers happy, we can fulfill on our promise, but also be able to reach customers and their own sort of preferences and their own sort of tastes in these individual markets. And I think that is challenging, but something we have to think about day in and day out.
What do you kind of feel like Marantz does to separate itself from the rest of the crowd as a brand then? So we put on our marketer hats. We're talking about just the brand specifically. Kind of what do you guys do to step out?
Well, I mean, I'll answer first, and Emmanuel, fill in the blanks on this as if you feel something different. But to me, it sounds cliche, but I do think our commitment to sound performance is second to none. And I think that if an average consumer were able to see the number of hours, days, years, and the number of people that we put on a given program within the Marantz brand, how we're fine-tuning all of the different pieces, the components, subcomponents, and so forth within the product to make the most musical sound. I think, to me, the end product, especially for what we charge in a lot of different price categories, I think it really stands out as a key differentiating factor. And I think that's why we continue to get 5-star reviews for our products in audiophile circles. I think people respect and honor the sound quality that we're able to deliver, but I think it's not without just a ton of effort. So to me, it's the team, it's the engineering, it's the sound master that we have. It's all of this that goes into just building the very best sounding product possible. And I think that, the staff that we have is, in my mind, second to none.
Emmanuel, all that being said, does Marantz have a unique sound to it? Do they go for a goalpost that has Marantz sound labeled over the top of it? Is that something that you shoot for?
So the short answer is yes, but it's probably a little bit more complicated than that, because yes, there's, I would say, some what people will define as a Marantz sound, but there's also mainly a way to do it and to reproduce it. So Joel touched base on that. So we have a sound master, and in every single product we do, we make sure that it reproduces the sound in the most musical way, as Joel mentioned, and also in a similar way across the range of the product. So of course, all the different products will be at different level because they use different parts, different component inside. But we made, and Marantz have been known for that for years, we make technical choices in the product we do, which is to maximize the amount of passive component we use. So we have a technology that we call HDAM, that stands for Hyper Dynamic Amplifier Module, where basically instead of using a chipset solution for those small amplifier, we're going the way to use passive component and rebuilding that circuitry, which allow us to individually select the part and really tune them like you will tune a musical instrument. So I would say, yes, there's a Marantz sound, and there's we have a way to describe it, and people have a way to use it, and everybody will tell you that when they listen to a Marantz product, it is a little bit different. But I like to think about it that for us, the idea is really to respect the recording and the artist or the way the work was done, and try to give the best possible experience to the consumer at the end. And Marantz has been known for a long time to have this very open stage, very wide sound stage, and very, I would say, warm sound in a way. But the idea there is really, to get the best possible, no matter the recording, to the best possible experience to the end user when they listen to the product.
So over the course of interviewing many companies in the audiophile area, I've noticed that one particular factor swings quite a bit depending on the company, and that is how many people have a say in the tuning of each product. For example, if we look at Focal, there's a product manager there that kind of has a vision of the sound for every product, and he does a massive amount of tuning for the products that they release, and he has like kind of the first say, you could say. He has kind of a lot of pull over the sound. There are some smaller companies that do that as well. And then when you look at a company like Harman Kardon, they do a little bit more on the consumer research side with their Harman Curve and a lot of that. And they have a committee that they at least pull some observation from. Obviously, behind the curtain, there's going to be more people saying how things should be fine-tuned. But how does it work at Marantz specifically in terms of number of people, or if it's more than just one person individually? How do you guys source that and pull all the information together?
So for us, it's very simple. The final validation of the product is just one person, which is the sound master, which is there for the brand. There's actually two of them. There's one for the AVR category and there's one for the hi-fi category, but they work together. And in the process of developing the product, there's a small group of persons, because there's also people in the US and in Europe and in Japan, because we have those different markets, as we were mentioning before. And even if when you have a great product and a good product, you can go to any region and everybody will please the product, it's still important that to ensure that there's more people involved in that discussion. But the final saying is the sound master, which is located in Japan. And actually, if you look at our communication, there's a picture of him in most of the on our website or some of the documentation we do. And he's been trained for many, many years. So he's been trained by the previous sound manager for more than 10 years. And the dedication, the attention to the detail, and the long listening hours, and I spend time with him every time I'm going to Japan or whatever. And there's so many stories around that you hear, whatever, where, for example, he always mostly work in the evening. And when you ask him the question, why do you work so late? I say, because, hey, we're in the office, so when people are gone, there's less computer running, there's less stress on the power, so I get the feeling I can have a better listening experience and really hear all the small detail. And of course, there's that subjective part, and there's also the measurement. So it's a combination of both. At the end, there's a lot of element. But the sound master is the person who validates the product at the end. And if he's not happy with what he's listening to, the product will not be released. One of the other big advantage that we have our own manufacturing in Japan. So it is really, really easy for some of the products which are manufactured there to really change some of the parts, some of the things, and react really, really quickly during those listening sessions for him to listen to modification of some part. And sometimes just a simple thing as a screw, that could vibrate or not, do have a huge impact. So of course, when you do a $599 product, it is a little bit less true. But when you do a $10,000 amplifier or whatever, the attention there is really at the peak. But every single product we do is validated by the sound master, being it $599 or being $10,000.
So does Marantz actually conduct consumer research on some level, or is it mostly like a more Apple type of view, where they used to say Apple knows what they want to sell and they don't really do a ton of consumer feedback? Now they do now, but originally they kind of had their foot on the ground about that idea. Do you guys feel like you do? I mean, the obvious answer is, do you spend money doing consumer research, or is it something that you just kind of gather feedback online? Because there's quite a few opinions online, if you haven't noticed.
There's two levels in that answer, and I will probably let Joel answer to the second part of it. For the sound part, no, because we have the way we want to do it. So we acknowledge the fact that the way the music needs to be reproduced change a little bit because the source material is also changing, and there's a lot of evolution there. So, of course, clearly, the 2020 sound of Marantz is not the same as the 1953 sound from Soul B Marantz initially, because there's been so much progress in the electronic and in all the part and all of that. That is for sure. But in that sense of the sound reproduction, no, we know how we do it, and there's some measurement in the back or whatever, so we could react to some of the things we're hearing from the field and from the customer, measure them, test them, and see if something needs to be changed. So there's some tiny evolution there. I would say in the way people use the product, and that's where I will also let Joel come into that, and the news source and the streaming and all of that. Yes, in that case, it is important to understand how customers use the product and what we could be missing or what we could be improving in the product. And Joel mentioned going after those new customers. This is clearly an area where we need to know those people better and understand what they're looking for. So I don't know if you want to add things there, Joel.
Yeah, I mean, we're always getting feedback from our customers, either on the phone, through email, even in person. And so that continues to be an important pillar for us, that the feedback we get from our customers gets infused into the products, gets infused into the services, the website experience, everything that we do, everything that touches our customer. I think we have to continue to get that feedback. So that is something we always do. I think when it comes to focused market research, when we're talking about a new product or a new innovation, in those cases, we'll do focused market research, but it's sort of case by case. I would fortify what Emmanuel said in terms of sound quality and so forth, but there are times where, we're thinking about an idea or a product concept and we want to go out and talk to Marantz, faithful customers who know the brand extremely well, or talk to new customers and see what they think about it. So we do it in case by case basis there.
Very cool. What do you think are some of the biggest technological advances in two-channel audio in the past 15, 20 years? And how has Marantz applied those features into their products? Because we've kind of gone through a big wave of with digital coming up and integrating into a traditionally analog kind of platform. What do you guys think about all that?
For me, high-quality streaming digital music. So initially the digital music was there, but the quality was not there. So this is why even today, there's some people that have some resistance against that. But I believe the convenience of streaming music is really what's gaining it all at the end, I would say. So that ability from your phone or your computer to get access to any music, any genre, any type worldwide, by the touch of a button and get it to stream right away. So that part is really, for me, not necessarily, I would say, the revolution or whatever, but really what changed the way of listening to music. So there is moment where you will still want to, listen to a CD or take a LP album and read the cover and read the booklet which is in it and take the time and enjoy that. But there is also time where you just want to listen to music and you want to listen to that music right now, and you don't want to go to look for your collection of music to find that track. And digital music really give you that right away by the touch of a button. And no, the quality is really there finally, so which is also the big win.
Do you think that audiophiles specifically kind of require a different tonal structure than the mainstream? Is there a difference there to you at all?
I just think that they audiophile by nature, because they spend more time or whatever, they're probably a little bit more educated, so they hear more detail sometimes in the music. So they may had a little bit more correction of that thing like that on their side. But it's just, I think, the way I look at reproduction of music or whatever, it is a kind of a journey, and the audiophile are more advanced in the journey or whatever. So the way sometimes the analogy I use is car. So I remember for me when because I was in Europe when I turned 18 years old and I get my driving license, I bought my first car. I did not have a lot of money. It was a used car, but for me it was the best car in the world. But if you think about it, it did not have assisted direction. It did not have automatic gear shift or whatever. It was just really an old car with a lot of miles on it. But it was doing the job, and I was so happy with that car that I could have drive anywhere. And one day my dad tried my car. I said, "Wow, that your car is really, really bad." And if I had to drive that car again today, I would probably have the same feeling because I've been used to get better and better and better car. And music is the same thing. So if you always listen to, I would say, compressed music on a entry-level system or whatever, for you, it's probably really, really good. If one day you get the chance to listen to an amazing sound system and you have to go back to that system, then you're going to notice right away the difference and you're going to understand why when you pay more money, you get better reproduction. So that's exactly what it is. It is an indication like wine, like anything in the world, right? It's when you get access to the best, then it's hard then after to step down in some way.
So we talked about the evolution of technology. We talked the evolution of Marantz. What kind of specific products are you guys launching currently that kind of are an answer to those two types of evolution?
What we just announced, actually, 2 new hi-fi products that are equal parts, I would say, performance-setting benchmarks for us, as well as very symbolic products for us. The Model 30 and the SACD30N. So Emmanuel, the team, have been working really hard over the last 3 years to develop the very best hi-fi products with an evolved design language and user experience. I think this is something that when we talk about attracting new customers and so forth into the brand, we know that customers, yes, they care a lot about audio performance and accuracy in our reproduction, but they also care a lot about the care that we put into the design, the user experience, the remote control. All these things add up. And certainly the approachability of the products, the materials that we use in the design and the construction and so forth. I think a lot of this stuff is really, really important. So those 2 products were just announced yesterday. As I said, they're very symbolic as well for us because it's the first 2 products in our new design language. So over 70 years, almost 70 years, I should say, we've been at this for Marantz. And, a lot of brands don't have to deal with creating products from generation to generation. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes, brands may be 5-10 years old. They have to worry about creating consistency in their products from one product to the next or from, a product cycle to the next product cycle. But I think when brands like Marantz that have legacies almost 70 years long, we have to make very smart and practical evolutions in our products, in our product planning, in our assortment, and in our designs. And so I think these 2 products that we announced are an amalgamation of all of that work that we put into evolving over the time into introducing our brand to new customers, to new audiophiles, and to these discerning explorers that we talk about. So I think those are great products. I think where we go from here, we're going to continue to invest in our core categories. So, hi-fi and AV receivers. Those are really kind of the 2 predominant categories that Marantz has traditionally focused on. I think we still have a ton of opportunity to enhance our core business. So let's say that's the first thing. Where we go from there, we certainly think the Marantz proposition can enter into a host of other markets that we really haven't considered, let's say, in the last handful of years. So you could look at things like wireless speakers or active speakers. You could look at headphones. You could look at soundbars. There's so many different categories that exist in the market that we're thinking about. But it would be too early for us to comment at this point in terms of where we actually want to go. Still sorting through a lot of different options, and this would probably be an area where we want to go get some consumer feedback. So we're in the midst of that work, and we would be excited to come back on the show and share where we go when the time is right.
You had mentioned that the R&D cycle for these 2 new products were 3 years. Is that a typical length for you guys, or short or long? Because I know there is an aesthetic change to this product, these 2 new products. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So I would say for product with a new industrial design, that's probably the normal, I would say, timeline. It's also going to be the case for all what we call the reference model or the premium range. It's also 3 years, and sometimes it could be even more than that if you integrate a new, amplification technology that you need to test and validate. It takes more time. I would say when you have an existing industrial design and thinking more about maybe a replacement product or whatever, 12 to 14 months is about the right time for development of new product. It's never really shorter than that because of the way the listening, the sound master, the validation, and all those steps we take into the process. It takes longer. And those new products are manufactured in our own factory in Japan, in Shirakawa. So we also are the manufacturer of those products. So the process is also much longer when you do that.
Very interesting. Visually, Marantz has gone through a couple of iterations. I think one of the ones that I always think about fondly is the old silver front plates with very hefty switches, right? What kind of evokes a change in the aesthetics? What evokes specifically, like, hey, we have a classic Marantz look right now. We need to change this up a bit. What kind of pulls that out?
Well, one of the things we're trying to do with our aesthetic is to really create a lot of consistency in the signature design elements that Marantz is and should be known for. And I think if you look back in our assortment, I think there's ways that we can improve on that. So I think when we started thinking about creating a new design language, starting with these products, one of the things that we wanted to spend quite a bit of energy on is looking back into our history. So we talked to a whole bunch of people inside the company that have, in some cases 20, 30 years with Marantz, to talk to them about what they deem the most important products of our legacy. And so we really look back at, everything from the 2250 to the Model 9, the Model 8, and you could even go even to the current day where we have the PM10 reference amplifier, that there's signature design elements that really Marantz is known for. And when you talk to our customers, these are the things that stand out to them. So I think that's really what we're trying to do, is create a cohesive design language that celebrates and honors our history, but does it in a way where we're modernizing these signature design elements for new customers as well.
Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it, Joel and Emmanuel. It's been a very enlightening conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for listening to the Occasional Podcast Season 4. The Occasional Podcast is a production of the Part-Time Audiophile Network, which includes parttimeaudiophile.com, the Occasional Magazine, the PTA newsletter, and audiohead.com. You can stay in touch with us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. The Occasional Podcast is produced and hosted by Brian Hunter, executive produced by Scott Hall at PTA Productions. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the Occasional Podcast on iTunes, Google, Spotify, or wherever your favorite podcasts are downloaded.